Good morning. It is, what is that, quarter to 10 UTC, almost noon Central European markets. London markets open up. In any case, we'll go through Bitcoin. Had a massive rally back to the downside, and we've grabbed a lot of that older local liquidity. And now we're actually seeing for the first time a pretty significant potential higher low with lots of liquidity building above. So locally, that we've continued to dump through that higher leverage liquidity, the really local stuff. We've created that new low. This is breaking some high time frame structure. And then going into the evening and overnight, we saw massive expansions back up that created a pretty significant higher high, regaining some previous high levels. And now we're reestablishing some support around about 63.7, where we were really interested in holding yesterday. So it's a pretty interesting level for potential little localized regain of structure. But yeah, the big stuff right above us, 67.8 or 66.8 to about 67.2. It's a massive block, so a couple billion in short liquidity in that place on the local stuff. Currently just going a bit sideways since we are in a pretty much a volume dead zone, but we'll go through that. The higher time frame as well, pretty simple. We've still got liquidity to the downside before we start getting to a massive gap. That big, heavy, long liquidity is still acting as a magnet to the downside. So any localized failures here that start breaking back below 63.7, those current local lows, if we can continue this or consider this a potential deviation of that, there is the bounce chance going back to 68.8K and potentially higher. If there's any local failure, 63.7, yeah, we want to target that higher leverage liquidity down to 61.4, potentially enough going all the way back to 60K. Before we run into some really, basically volume dead zones, some liquidity dead zones. So the price should definitely reverse at these kind of very low levels of liquidity to take. Just a glance at the rest of the market, it's a bit middling for the most part. Just some alts that are standing out as being quite oversold in this area. But in general, it's a pretty much a mixed bag, since we've now created a technical higher low and higher high potential, or a higher high for sure, but a potential higher low in the market. Looking at the local liquidity liquidation map, yes, we are very close to that pretty high leverage stuff right above us, with some more attractive things going higher than that. If I go on the weekly time frame, obviously that 67K, 68.8, it starts to get really attractive once we start gaining levels to go higher. To the downside, the inverse is true. There's still some good stuff at 62K. We are much closer currently to that local 65K liquidity than we are, say, going back to 63.5K. So that's always a good sign. If there's some localized breakdown, then we start targeting that 63.5K potentially. But in the higher time frame, definitely a lot more short liquidity closer to the current price. Looking over at the long shorts, just take a gander. Yes, sentiment still very much the downside, which is good. We've been considering in the last couple of days building that long ratio to the upside as we've been breaking down. This is pretty typical, as like this continues to increase as retail traders continue trying to short, long into the lows. And now that we've seen it from last night when we started seeing those regain of level, we're actually seeing a breakdown where people are trying to short into this upside move. So this is kind of the first real change we've seen since we started getting more long back on the 29th. So this is a decent change. We're very much more long than short, but the fact that we're now becoming more short, and that's increasing, that's a potential local liquidity, people trying to short into new lows. So there's that potential for regain to go higher. Looking over at trading light, yes. So we talked about this block yesterday. That block got failed into really hard, and then over into the evening, we saw massive plunge protection stepping in. What is that, around 16 UTC to potentially hold price? And since then, it's been doing pretty decent. We've got pretty organic looking long stepping in to hold the level. We're at some localized resistance, pretty middling. Not a whole lot of stuff there. So we'll keep an eye on that going into the New York Open, because any failures that start to break underneath that 63.7 zone, this block here, we could potentially keep targeting back into some new lows. However, this high that we created here, even on the 1 hour, even on the 4 hour, starts to look pretty attractive. Also, if we're looking at open interest, we see increasing open interest in the upside move. We see decreasing as we start breaking into new highs, which is good, which means people are getting stopped out, and or shorts are getting stopped out, and people are also potentially taking profit on the longs. And then if we look at the higher time frame with the footprint for the actual order flow of levels, those local lows, especially here down at what was that 62.8, these guys have all been taken out, like for the most part, with that higher leverage stuff. The real block starts to be attractive once we start gaining back above, 66.8, like we've been saying, 70K. All of these shorts going all the way back to the Monday dump, these are still in play. So if we start to see regains above 66.5, realistically 67K, there is enough fuel to push us back to the upside. Locally here, we're going to see some punishment. There's some potential higher lows if we go back to the downside for some continuation. But for right now, it's a bit middling. I am really interested in the fact that we've broken this new high, which we can go through on TradingView. So looking at TradingView in the general plan, so we talked about 63.7. It breaks the high time frame upside, and I talked about a potential in my post as well. It's like there's the potential for a deviation where we break down really hard and we have a strong regain. That's actually playing out right now. So this the fact that we've done this on like the 1 hour and 4 hour, popped a new daily high. That daily open also coming back above some previous structure, which is good. Right now, the major resistance happens to be the monthly 64, call it 6. That localized gain should see us retarget really low movements up to the daily open. The more significant stuff starts to happen at 65.5. That's an obvious, level that we've lost that led us to low. If we regain that, we can actually really effectively target 66.8 back into, this heavy liquidity pocket, which we have above us. So until then, optimistically, yes, we've done the move down to the downside. We've held the Q3 open, which is good. Any new losses are that low, and yes, we should be targeting much lower towards 60K before any significant type of bounce. I am a little bit optimistic just because, again, we've been trying to long into the lows to cover net shorts from previous levels, and I think they're still valid. Some of these price movements that we've gotten this week from Tuesday, we're getting at least 1.4%. Even from yesterday, we're getting that kind of like 1.5, 1.4% move up. I didn't quite get that from the lows. I'm optimistic here at these levels. If we have a breakdown back to the July Q3, the last thing you can see here would be a last drive potentially down to the Q3 to reestablish support. To look something like that, and then potential pop back to the upside. But the levels here are pretty clean as far as I'm concerned. The more obvious trades are regaining 65.5, especially if we start moving into a sideways grindy up structure. It just starts then to become more short trappy than long trappy, which it has been. Waiting for a little bit more confirmation here. There's some economic data coming out an hour before the New York opens, and we'll see if that starts to indicate if the FOMC is going to cut interest rates in September, which is on the table. So we'll see if that starts to get priced in. But generally speaking, these are the levels. Looking for some potential reversal here because we've created some higher highs. Anything that gains this back, 65.5, we're actually seeing 1 hour and 4 hour priority change, trending change back to the upside. So keep that in mind. Watch the 4 hour structure as well. It's not wildly attractive just because we've had that kind of bounce reaction back above levels, but the clear and obvious thing is that we're potentially squeezing back higher, and we want to see some type of momentum before we start entering larger positions. So this is a middling area. If you've got profit targets, they got hit for the most part to the downside of July Q3. Still net short from the breakdown of level. That starts coming into question if we start seeing regains at 65.5 for some priority trend change. So that's that. Have a good one. Catch you guys on Monday. Peace.